Hello, everyone. I have to say, after 3.5 hours of sleep this morning, this story came as a sort of a surreal hallucination. But alas, it's true. Gab has banned pornography from its website. Now, I do not care so much about this specific instance, at least not for this video. Rather, the question and the curious thoughts that came about afterwards. That question, as indicated by the title, is that porn is not free speech. I had a hard time really understanding this one. This was an unusual argument that, on my short time here on Earth, I never thought I would have to hear, especially in the age in which we live in. But as I thought about it more and looked up information on the topic, I found that it has actually come up several times in the past, usually revolving around the exploitation of those in said media as courts made their decisions on certain lawsuits. So first, I want to show you a brief look at an article I found on medium.com, and that is an article written today by a Mr. Scott Cunningham, in which he asks, does Gab's porn ban go against free speech? He says, Gab has been getting a lot of backlash for its strict stance on pornography, claiming that they are still in support of free speech but banning all pornography on their platform. Let's talk about it. Yes, Scott. Let's. It has taken a turn for the worse as the CEO has begun denouncing Twitter users and moralizing at people. Bad editing. Using his own personal religious views from the company account. It's one thing to hold certain values, and it's another to actively push them on others. I totally agree, and already I find this article to be prepping the seeds of discourse. Quote, I honestly think that porn should be kept on porn sites. Because if our social platforms are full of pornography and explicit content, then how can children use it? How can you use it at work or in any professional environment? Well, Scott, in my professional opinion, children should not be on social media. This is coming from an individual who is one of the youngest millennials by year, and in my opinion, children, being those under 13, should not be allowed to be on social media. Teenagers, meaning those 13 and above, can be on social media, but at their own risk. At this point, it is up to the operators of the website to set their own rules and guidelines and allow for the people using said site to make their decisions. Moreover, I do not think you should use social media at work. You are not at work to be on social media. That's not what most people are paid to do. And if you are on social media at work because your work requires it, maybe don't follow porn accounts on your work social media account. Similar to the next part, how do you use it in a professional setting? Well, I'm an engineer, and I'll be the first to tell you, social media bears very little to my overall work experience, and it is hardly something that I actively peruse while in a professional setting. Seeing as you are a writer or contributor to the medium, I can understand your point, but the simple fact is, take responsibility for what you bring to work. Carrying on. Social media is supposed to be about communication, not about pornography. You do not have the right to say that, because you, Scott, are not the person who dictates how social media is used and operated. You can only decide that for yourself as a user. Quote, for the same reason that pornography websites are not social media platforms, I don't think social media platforms should be pornography websites. Some are, Scott. Now, this next sentence is a bit long, and doesn't make much sense as a full sentence, so I'm going to break it up into phrases so that we can take a look at it more easily. You have to also consider that they have to pay to host the content. Every person who owns and operates a personal website has to pay to host the site. That's how websites work. And when you're introducing so much more legal issues and liabilities, which will make it much more challenging for users to use the platform anywhere at any time as social media platforms should be used. Private website owners are responsible for the content that is put up. If the website is an open forum, most would like to see illegal activity kept from said sites, or else some authority will shut it down. And again, that is completely based on your interpretation of social media. Then it's much easier and more sensible to just outright get rid of porn. You must also consider that it's hard to prove consent, age, etc. in short clips, and if they had to manually review it, it would be extremely cumbersome. Well, I agree with that last point to be made here. It is hard to police such things. There are ways to keep them limited, but yes, consent and age have always been a hard thing to police by sight. He continues on explaining how his thoughts have been changed by people and that he is open to having a discussion. The links to his article in archive form are in the description down below. But moving on from this article and talking more candidly, I would like to talk with you about this topic and let my brain basically move from one thought to the next. Feel free to criticize in the chat, but here goes. The first question that started to impact my mind in regards to porn being considered not covered by free speech is, well, why not? Seriously, I started breaking it down, and basically, what I have found is that at its core, porn is less of an object itself, but rather a medium. The reason I say this is because of the vast ways people have created and utilized it. Look, what is porn? Porn is sex, right? Shown through a variety of ways, but most people consider the internet version, so pictures and videos on a porn site usually. Okay, sex by itself. Is that free speech? I mean, yes and no. Speech, well, kinda, but only in the sense that speech and expression are linked, but not exactly the same. For example, it is legal for me not only to say the words I am saying now, but also legal for me to upload this video and share it with all of you through the medium I have chosen. I characterize them slightly differently so I can be more specific, but yes, legally, free speech and free expression are the same thing. Fucking sue me. But back on the point. Is uploading a video or picture of oneself free speech or free expression? Yes, I would definitely say so. We're not discussing revenge porn here, so let's assume that this porn that we are discussing is legal, consented upon, and not exploitative. Meaning, if you wanted to use the minor exploitative route to try and get me with, here is my quick comment on it. The problem is not with the pornography part of that word, it is the exploitation of an unconsenting minor part. If you cannot draw that distinction, then I don't know if I can help you. Yes, legal age of consent differs from place to place. That is your own country's legality to question. For the United States, though, it's 18, and that's what I'm sticking with. But moving on from that, because I have no desire to pursue that line of thought any longer, is what I mean by saying porn is a medium. There are varied types of porn. We can use sexualities in this case to illustrate the point. Straight, bi, gay, trans, etc. These variances can lead to a vastly different depiction of the same concept of sex on screen. Whether or not you are into these things is not the point. The fact is that these things exist, and there are enough differences to make it worth mentioning. Let's compare this idea of medium to art. Art is a depiction of sometimes a form of deeper meaning expressed by an artist, whether that be strife, beauty, some form of recollection of an event, an abstract commentary on life, and so on. But there are also artistic renderings that mean literally nothing. Sometimes people just like to draw, and there is no deep meaning behind it. Does that mean that it is not art? Well, not to me. Back to porn. Straight porn would be that last case I mentioned, where quite typically it is very bare bones, uninspired sex on video. However, who is to say that a couple of gay men making a porn together isn't a form of rebellion against an authority they perceive to have been oppressing them? Is that not something that could be true? What's odd is, very few times we know what is behind the mentality of the people making porn in general. And ironically, this brings me into a much more involved version of porn, and that is professional porn. There are award shows for this shit, including writing, camera work, acting, etc. Let's say that for the sake of an argument, you told actors that they were not allowed to act a certain scene because you did not consider that scene to be within the realm of free speech. And of course, this works into our favor because plenty of rated R movies have sex scenes in them. So is that no longer allowed? Are writers, directors, producers, set designers, cameramen, actors no longer allowed to do these things because they are not covered by free speech? I mean, you could say that it is different because it is part of a larger work in which sex is not the sole focus. At which point, I encourage you to stop watching amateur clips on Pornhub and take note that there are plot-driven porns. The story may not always be great, but that doesn't mean that it's not part of a larger story, especially when you get into that shit that used to come on at 10 p.m. on Cinemax. Let's be frank, most of you watching have probably seen what I mean. But these are actors. They are putting on performance. Is that not free expression? Or shall we start categorizing which porn we find detestable? Hentai has already taken plenty of flack for it because the depictions resembling less than the approved age characters, of course. Many people then go into the argument I wanted to avoid, so I'm going to do that again. I have made a video on that in the past, it's on the channel, go take a look. Now, hentai ironically is art.
It's called hentai, and it's art.
I mean quite literally, it is a drawing. It is an artistic representation of something. And ironically, much like I discussed earlier, hentai usually has a plot. Again, not usually a good one, but a plot nonetheless. And erotica, of course, is the full circle of this, where it is literally all story with smut thrown in. So what again are we talking about? Porn? Can you be more specific as to which porn you mean? Because at this point, there is so much we could be considering that simply what you see on Pornhub is just surface level, and to really get down to it, it encompasses more than you'd ever expect. Let's say erotica is out of the question because it is a written media instead of a visual media like images or videos. Fine. But basically, what detractors are saying is that porn isn't free expression because all the porn they've seen is without substance, or simply, they didn't care enough to find out what goes on behind the camera because they were too busy wanking it. Well, that was a bit of a tangent and a rant. I want to thank you if you've made it this far. Links to the articles I've mentioned and shown down below. Let me know what you think, and feel free to share this video to people who post porn isn't free speech. Might as well start a controversy, am I right? Thanks for joining me this evening, and I will see y'all soon.